Relationship capital is the igniter to the flame of difference when you're attempting to establish a sense of allyship and understanding. It's the first brick that you must lay if you're attempting to travel down the bridge of trust and appealing to others to understand the need to take a leap of faith and jump into the arms of establishing a community of camaraderie and a sense of internal and external belonging. However, when it comes to the relationship between the youth of today and the police, there continues to be some fractures which have to be mended in order to move forward. According to the Pew Research Center, American youth trust in the police varies by age and demographic groups, which are also, of course, affected by race and the environment in which you grew up. The center reports that only 10% of young black adults, as compared to only 18% of Hispanic adults, have a high degree of trust that they'll be treated fairly if stopped by the police. 32% of white and 16% of Asian young adults have confidence that they'll be treated fairly by police by comparison. Which causes me to want to have a conversation about how we bridge the gap of understanding and have a conversation between the police and the youth, which they're sworn and trusted to protect and serve. In order to find such internal motivation, I'm inspired to bring you the story of TAPS, or the Teen and Police Service Academy, which works to reduce the social distance between law enforcement and youth, all in an effort to provide service-based learning to allow for a greater hope of understanding and camaraderie between the two parties involved. Dr. Everette is the executive director of TAPS, and he took some time out of his schedule this week to engage in conversation with me about strengthening the relationship between the cops and the youth they serve, and the work involved in doing it effectively. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Doctor, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to learn about all of the great work that you do at TAPS. Great to see you on this cold Tuesday morning, and I can't wait to engage in conversation. Thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, doing the research, and putting us on a national stage that allows folks to know more about the Teen and Police Service Academy.
Absolutely, Doctor. And I know that you work to sort of bridge the gap between today's youth and our law enforcement officials. So I'm wondering if we can begin our conversation by you telling me about all the great work that you do at TAPS to really start to have those bridges of understanding between the youth and the police.
Well, since 2011, the Teen and Police Service Academy started by the Houston Police Department with a federal grant from the COPS office has come together to respond to this issue. Remember, 2011 was before we had the tragic summers of 2014, 2015, Michael Brown, all of those that are just etched in our mind, in our memory. We knew that this was an issue. One does not have to look far and deep into the research and the literature to see that the relationship between the police and especially the African-American community, even more specifically, the young African-American male, is tenuous. It's one that is one rooted in history that has a difficulty. The question becomes, what are you going to do about it? Are we just going to sit there and say police are bad, youth are bad, and not do something about it? Well, it was because of the wisdom of, at that time, Houston Police Chief Charles McClellan, who talked to his assistant chiefs, and one assistant chief, Brian Lumpkin, then said, yeah, I like what you're saying, Chief, that we're going to do something about building the relationship between youth and police, specifically African-American and Latino. He then, Chief Brian Lumpkin, took that, gave me a call as he was teaching from me at University of Houston Clear Lake when I was the department chair. We worked together and we put together this grant for the COPS office back in 2011 to create TAPS Academy. So it comes out of the Houston Police Department. But in 2015, we realized that being sort of a neutral force and having our own 501c3 nonprofit status was essential. So we could be equal. We could have equal footing for both police and youth. And so since 2015, we have been our own independent nonprofit, still very much working with the Houston Police Department and other police departments around the country. And then past Police Chief Charles McClellan, he now is a board member of ours. And we still do our work in some 7 states across the United States, with our home being Houston, Texas.
Well, fabulous. And, Doctor, I know that I don't need to tell you this, but when African-American youth are stopped by the police, there's more sense of being afraid than their non-Black counterparts. So what do you think we need to do specifically to sort of mend the relationship between Black youth and police specifically?
When we look at it, it's about understanding each other, and what we use is the term social distance, reducing the social distance. We're reducing social distance right now, you and I. We're reducing the social distance between you and your audience. The more interaction that occurs, the more conversation, the more honesty, the more appeal of talking, to get to know, to actively listen, allows for us to know each other better. And for the most part, we find that those people that we know better, that we trust, that we believe in, we have more of a care, we have more of a desire to be around them, and we feel more responsibility and connection with them. When you start getting those words coming together, connection, trust, respect, communication, active listening, it makes for better relationships. Whether it be with your spouse, a brother, a sister, when you don't talk to someone, you have less of communication and greater social distance. But when you're communicating, you're being honest and you're allowing for communication to occur, there's more of a chance of building a strong relationship. What people say, relationship. TAPS Academy tries to step in that gap, build that relationship between the most disenfranchised folks when it comes to policing, the African-American and Latino male. Those young African-American Latino males constantly have the least like of police. Well, we give an opportunity for real police officers who, trained by us, to build that opportunity of relationships, with both being on equal footing, where police officers are listening to the youth and youth are listening to the police in our modules, from everything from conflict mediation, drugs and alcohol, human trafficking, college is not the 13th grade, all of our 20 some odd different modules. So we do it by just falling back on what psychology, criminology, and other fields tell us to do. You gave a wonderful example of the police stop, the traffic stop. One of our modules, and what we were very much involved in here in Houston, is the Community Safety Education Act of Texas back in 2017. It states, this is law in the state of Texas, that all peace officers, all persons applying for a driver's license, those people receiving corrective driving education must take a course called the Community Safety Education Act of Texas that says what should happen during a traffic stop. What are your rights as a citizen? What should the police officer do? How to properly complain during a traffic stop, and what to know what's going to happen during the traffic stop. We teach everyone, whether it be youth, parents, police officers. We've taught thousands and thousands what the Community Safety Education Act is about, so that that interaction during a traffic stop, people know more what's going on, can feel safer, know what their rights are, and everyone can go home safely from that traffic stop.
Yeah, and one of the ways that you continue to break down those barriers is by service-based and community learning to really meet the youth where they are in the community, and as you said, offer many different modules to put police and youth in the same sort of circumstance. So tell me about the importance of community-based learning and how big of an ally that is for the work that you do.
Yes, indeed, you're talking about service. And service is in our name, the Teen and Police Service Academy. When Chief Lumpkin and I put together the term TAPS Academy, we looked at, for example, in many neighborhoods, there is the Citizens Police Academy, where citizens can learn what officers do. We know that officers go through an academy to learn how to be a police officer. Why can't we provide some similar opportunity for the most disenfranchised youth to spend time with officers? So we said, let's create an academy that focuses on moving police and youth together to learn our modules, to come together and reduce their social distance, and also to build community. We build community through service learning. And our service learning consists of 3 parts: education in the classroom, action in the community, and reflection about what was learned. We think it's extremely important. Sadly, what we hear from many of the youth that are involved in our programming from the initial start is, I don't want to do any service to the community. That's what folks who are in prison do. That's what folks, when they're penalized on probation, they have to do. We work to change that frame of mind to say, why can't we have your service, your mind, your hands, your body, your feet working to build up community? Why do we have to pass the homeless guy there? Why can't we do something to try to help feed him, try to help him job, try to help him get off drugs and alcohol? Many of the problems that are in our communities, we can be part of the solution. Why do we have to pass a lot that's filled with trash? Why can't we learn that, hey, when you do that, we call it broken windows theory in criminology, people are more likely to throw trash and be about disrupting the neighborhood when there's already trash there. So we teach with the education, the action, and then we reflect. We bring together community members and others. What did I learn? What am I going to do differently now? And the change really occurs. We have our students, the same students that said things like, oh man, I don't want to do a garden because I'm going to get my shoes dirty. Or one story I remember, a young lady years ago said, I don't want to do a community garden. I don't eat anything that comes from dirt. Well, we talked to her and we said, those French fries you like so much from McDonald's or Burger King, they come from probably the dirtiest vegetable there is, grown in the dirt, the potato. And she learned about nutrition and health coming from this experience. So we think that service learning is very important through education, action, and reflection. We require to evolve that the police officers and the youth work together to do all sorts of projects, whether it be working at a food bank, creating a quilt for veterans, all sorts of things. One of our projects just recently was, sadly, at one of our middle schools, a youth was killed there because of violence. They created a wonderful memorial for that youth and presented that to the family. So just all sorts of things that we can be a part. Our youth, our police can work together to build our community.
And you know, Doctor, one of the stepping stones to creating that sense of community is really breaking down the barriers towards communication and inclusiveness. So tell me about the work that you're doing to really eliminate those barriers towards communication to create a more robust sort of sense of understanding from the youth that you serve, my friend.
You know, I really like your questions because they're showing the in-depthness of you understanding what we're trying to accomplish. Yes, we want to reduce social distance, but it's about inclusiveness. It's about understanding what are the important points of police, what are the important points of youth and their communities. And then we find that there's a lot of commonality that occurs if we listen to each other. Example, every police officer wants to go home. Every youth wants to go home. Do we have to make the interaction of the two a potential point that will stop each going home safely? But if we listen to each other, we know that the police officer has stress in doing his job. Honestly, the police officer is afraid at times to do his job. It's the same thing that the youth has. The youth has stress of being a 15, 16, 17-year-old, perhaps living in a high crime area, knowing how difficult it is to walk from bus stop to home and whom he has to go through and what dangers may exist in making that walk from bus stop to home. And then finding those commonalities. We have a colleague of ours in TAPS Academy in Newark, New Jersey, and she's studying how close the relationship or how close the lifestyles of and police are, especially youth in some of the most stressful areas. She looks at their lack of exercise because of time or security. She looks at the foods that they eat, their recreational activities, how alcohol, drugs, and sex and other negatives come in to be diversions from the hard work or hard life that they're living. So there's lots of commonalities. TAPS Academy provides the environment for the two to talk to each other, be inclusive, to listen actively to each other, to allow for the exchange of ideas so that I better understand you and you better understand me.
Yeah, absolutely. And Doctor, I'm curious to get your thoughts on the concept of allyship and really embracing different a different community of people who you don't really interact with on a regular basis, because I think allyship is a big part of sort of building those bridges of understanding. Would you agree with that?
I would, because allyship looks for leaders who provide support and that leadership for a community. I take issue with people who say something of this nature. There's nothing good that comes in the high crime areas, that the ghetto is just a terrible place and there's no good. No. There are assets in every community. There are people who are assets in every single community. We have to find them. We have to applaud them. We have to prop them up and allow them to be the very best they possibly can be. It is so enlightening at times to listen to our youth and hear their ideas. No, they may not articulate it like we do as adults. No, they may not have the vocabulary that we have mastered as having our doctorate degrees, master's degrees, bachelor degrees. But if you listen to the concepts, you hear hope in their words. You hear the desire for a better life in the future. You hear them wanting to get together with elements that will increase their likelihood of success. But unfortunately, they may not have the social capital, the social ties to put together idea with success. That's where we have a task. that through our allyship, our leadership, we become that person that fills in the gap, that allows for that youth to have a belief, but now we can achieve that belief by whom we know through our social capital that, hey, I want to go to college. It's interesting. College is a great example. So many of the youth that we work with in TAPS Academy say they didn't go to college because they can't afford it, but they've never heard of FAFSA. They believe that getting scholarships are only for the people with a 4.0 GPA. But when we enlighten them that there are scholarships simply because of where your neighborhood is, that maybe you're left-handed versus right-handed, maybe you write an essay talking about your experiences. We also learned that they believe college is much more expensive than what it really is. We also learned that they're fearful of taking loans out because they've seen the difficulty that other family members have had. It's our responsibility. Indeed, the Bible tells us, to those in which much is given, much is expected, and much is required. We follow that belief, and we call it in the social science term, social capital, that we want to give some of our social capital as police officers, as mentors to these youth, help them grow as they help us grow through what they have, through their vision, their youthfulness, and their desire with their teen brain working to be the very best that they possibly can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Doctor, you bring up the concept of vision, and if you'll indulge me for just a second, I wanted to share a personal story about myself. So, doctor, at the age of 9, I was told by a doctor that I would not be able to walk through the duration of my life because of the severity of my cerebral palsy. But doctor, I live my life through the saying that inclusion is the gateway to independence. And I'm curious, when you talk to youth about their upbringing and how it affects their worldview, how much do you think their upbringing will affect the way that they view police? And how do you sort of rectify the whole idea of it's not where you start, but it's where you finish? What are your thoughts there?
You are stating something so very important to us. We have a creed, a TAPS creed, that is found, and it's words that are said by every youth and our police officer at the beginning of a TAPS academy. And our original TAPS creed was written by youth back in 2012, and it talked about no longer being an at-risk child, but an at-promise teen. Well, we had people take issue with that term at risk. And just recently, just this year, we changed our creed to talk about it's not where I come from, but where I'm going and what I want to be that's more important. And that's what we truly believe in our TAPS creed and what we do. It's not where you're from, it's where you're going. And we want to provide the tool roadmap, but we can't provide the motivation. That comes from you, of where you can go. That comes from police officers talking and telling their story that they went to the same high school, they came from the same neighborhood, they had to overcome the same family situations, but they found individuals that mentored them, whether it be a coach, a teacher, a pastor, that helped them to be the very best they possibly can be. We also bring in community partners that have great insight, that believe in this relationship between youth and police. We put all that together to give opportunity to people who may think hopelessness is the way to go. And let's be very honest, that there can be a thought of hopelessness. If you look to your left and you look to your right in certain situations, and all you see is poverty, despair, drugs, alcohol, prostitution, you could easily fall into the belief that that's the only thing available. We know that some of our youth have not ventured to other parts of the city, have not been to other parts of the United States. We may not be able to take them all there, but through our experiences, through our presentation, we can, and we desire to do so much more. So yes, we certainly believe in providing these opportunities and overcoming the limitations that may appear in the front, but can be moved to the side and allow these youth to be the very best they can be.
Yeah, and, Doctor, I'm fascinated to ask you about your perception of both leadership and mentorship, and how you think those two fundamental characteristics are interconnected.
Think of this as that, as I said before, those in which much has been given, much is expected, and much is required. You can't hold in all the goodness that you have for yourself. What benefit is placing a light under a tree that no one can see? I think it is that of a responsibility to provide our youth with the opportunities that are out there. And let's not just limit it to the youth. Because of what we bring to the table, we offer opportunities for our officers to go to different levels, whether it be maybe pursuing their bachelor's degree, maybe a master's degree. Often in some of our modules, example, the finance module or the relationship module that we have, being the best self, we find that our officers are saying, I learned as much as the youth did in these modules. So if we understand that there are some sort of universal problems or issues that we all have as people, we understand those and we try to focus in on how we can build better relationships, active listening, good communication skills, empathy for others, building social capital. Those are some of the very important terms that we do every day in TAPS Academy.
Yeah, and Doctor, I'm fascinated to ask you about the sort of perception and perspective of the police officers themselves, because I know one of the distinct sort of offerings of your academy is really giving officers a chance to share their one-on-one lessons about life and their experiences. So I'm curious, what do you think the officers and the police and law enforcement officials you work with get most out of working with the TAPS Academy? What do you think the officers would say is the most beneficial factor from working with TAPS? I'm fascinated.
We ask them that as we have a pre-test and post-test survey that's done with our youth of how much they change as far as like, respect, and trust of the police. We also ask the officers questions about what did they learn about TAPS Academy. We're able to see with our youth 20, 30, 40% increase in like, trust, respect for the police. Wonderful. But we also want to know how much are the officers learning about the youth and the job they do. And it's a very interesting answer that we find. We find that the police officers say, I learned more about the youth, but I did not learn or didn't know before TAPS Academy the difficulty that some youth are dealing with every single day. That's a very powerful statement. Because remember, police officers, and we use police officers who are out there in the street doing the job every day, they go from call to call to call dealing with the problems. But they not necessarily see the causes of the problem, the rootness of the problem, and what the problem then sprouts out to be even in more detail. Example, a police officer comes to the house and wonders why a mother and father are arguing with each other, domestic violence. But police officers do not go perhaps to that refrigerator and see that the refrigerator is empty. They can see that they're living in a desperate situation. That stress that's created between mom and dad that then falls back to be risk factors for the youth. There's the joke. Everything's okay, but when the money is funny, things aren't good. And so the youth, that 15-year-old, he or she gets the stress of the family not having enough resources. We could go into so many other stories. One story that comes to my mind is the youth that said, hey, you expect me to do my chemistry homework or my math homework, what have you, and be ready to perform at school the next day, when I don't get to go to sleep until 2 o'clock in the morning or so, because my bed is the couch and my mother is entertaining on the couch until 2 o'clock in the morning, and I have to be out in the street, where can I do my homework? I can't go ahead and do my homework because you have assigned homework to me that requires a computer, but the only we have in the house is really our cell phone, our smartphone, and my mom is on the smartphone doing her thing most of the time. Sure, I could stay after school, but if I stay after school, then I come home late when it's dark, and I certainly don't want to walk through my neighborhood when it's dark. All of these are compounded that our officers get to know better what some conditions are. And then we connect that with some of our social service agencies to not just have the criminal justice system punishing those people and responding, but also having our community services through our service part of TAPS Academy responding and getting ahead of problems with social service agencies.
Yeah, and Doctor, I look at your program sort of like putting together a puzzle, and I'm curious, where do you think parents fall in putting together the puzzle? Because I think it's all interconnected, because if you come from a single parent household or a divorced household, it'll be different from whether you grow up with both parents. So I'm curious, what role do you think parents play in this whole equation?
Someone has to fill the void. Now, in decades ago, it was grandma living in the household and perhaps filling in that void. But here's what we're seeing, especially in the African American community. You may have grandma in the household, yes, but she becomes the primary caregiver. Whether it be that father is not there in the household, whether it be that mother is doing other things, maybe working 2-3 jobs, what have you, but grandma is not the second or third string. She's the first string in raising a child. And raising a child is a lot of work. Unfortunately, there's a philosophy that some people believe that raising a child is most difficult 0 to 5. Okay, I agree. I've raised a child and know that. But don't forget about those teenage years. Don't forget about when the youth, through their teen brain, are being the most difficult to you. When you want to have those conversations, they'd rather not. You've got to be persistent. You've got to allow for an understanding, and we teach this in our training for TAPS Academy, the teen brain, that impulsivity is an issue for the youth at this time. The desire, the unknown, the belief that they are invincible, all of those elements are coming together. But we as adults have to remember we were teenagers at one time. We have to remember that we have to have the patience to listen, to actively listen, and to support these youth through this very difficult time of trying to find themselves and who they are. So it's important to have mentors, teachers, pastors. We know that the church is not as active as it was at one time with some communities. We have to find these different places that allow for other than parents or grandparents or family members to step in to be vital resources in helping to raise our teens.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Doctor, I'm curious to get your thoughts on the concept of resilience and social capital. I know we've talked about it extensively this morning, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on how you think those two things are interconnected, and how much do they play in sort of creating sort of the internal motivation for you to really reach the fullest heights of their potential.
Resiliency is an important element that allows us to overcome the difficulties that are in front of us. We overcome difficulties and resiliency has a way of, the more you become dealing with situations, the better you become at handling them and overcoming them. It's kind of like exercise. The more I exercise, I can run this far today, but if I keep running, next week I'll be able to run farther and better. But we have to remember with resiliency, it also can make a feeling of despair, a feeling of mental lessness, a point of hopelessness if you constantly have a wall in front of you. Sure, you'll figure out a way to get over it, around it, underneath it. Sure, you'll do that to survive. But then at times you'll say to yourself, I want to do better than survive. I want to thrive. I want to be great. I want to be successful, especially if I see the images in front of me, whether it be through social media, TV, what have you, of all these other people who are succeeding, whether it be legal or illegal. Here you're getting into that decision point that youth must make. I'm tired of being on the losing team. I'm tired of being troubled in life and despair and not having and being less than. There's an opportunity over here, an illegal opportunity for me to have more success. There are some risks involved with it, but there's an opportunity there for me to have nice things that I see on TV, through social media, that the girl that I have interest in, she would like to have, and I could give those to her. Do I go ahead and take that risk for that criminal activity? Some say yes. Or do I stand in the pocket and do I say to myself, I'm going to keep churning, working hard, trying to get that success through legal means, but it's going to take longer, it's going to take patience, and it's not even a guarantee that I'm going to make it. We have to understand that these are the questions that come to people every single day. And through our experiences, we can help them to answer those questions and navigate those answers, to hang in there and believe that school is worth it. Starting off at a job where you're not the person in charge, but you're building skills so that you can be that person that has the higher income in the future, but it involves daily resiliency, building that for a goal in the future. And we help build that through the social capital that we have to be able to say to these youth, you can do it. Let me show you how.
Yeah, absolutely. Life is about climbing mountains, isn't it? Absolutely. And, Doctor, my final question for you has to do with legacy and how you view your own personal and professional legacy, and what do you think the future is for TAPS?
I am very blessed that three parts have come together for me. I was raised in Washington, D.C. in the 1970s, 1980s, where sadly it was known as the murder capital of the world. I was raised in an environment where it was just my mother and I, and she working very hard, and she letting me know that education was most important, sacrificing for me and showing herself as a great example for me every time, anytime, on the spot. Family members and others around, friends and church. When I look at it, my world has come together that I wanted to go to college and university because I wanted to understand why African Americans were so involved in the criminal justice system. Attending Rutgers University from Washington, D.C., I would travel up Interstate 95 in the early 90s time period, late 80s time period, and constantly being stopped by the Maryland Police Department or the New Jersey State Troopers, constantly being stopped by them. As a matter of fact, it became a court case, the Soto case and others, that indeed that was discrimination. That is where we have the term that comes about driving while black because of these cases of the late 80s and early 90s. But I could have easily said there that I had enough of police. I'm not interested in working with them. But instead, I think it inspired me to go ahead and obtain a PhD degree and work to every day through being a professor, through being embedded as a criminologist with the Houston Police Department, as well as working as the executive director of TAPS Academy to use what I have learned to help others to avoid some of the pitfalls and problems that exist in relationships with youth, police, race issues in the United States. So, yeah, I hope that my legacy, my next phase in life will be that TAPS Academy thrives, that we creating a generation of youth that believe in a system, that police officers believe in youth, and we have better opportunities for those people who are the most disenfranchised to succeed, And police officers see, of course, the value of their work, but how it involves procedural justice, treating everyone fairly and equally to allow for our better society in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. And, finally, Dr. Tell me if people want to get involved with TAPS Academy or contact you personally, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, let me first thank you again for this opportunity to reach your audience and your followers in expressing my love for TAPS Academy. And I hope that they can have an appreciation for TAPS Academy also. Please visit us at www.tapsacademy.org. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and see what we do. Take the time to see what we do at TAPS Academy. We are in Houston and 7 other states in the United States. So Texas and 7 other states. We may be in your state, but contact us if you would like to see TAPS Academy at your school, at your community group, your church, and learn what we do, as we are interested in being this next chapter of the DARE, the GREAT, the Citizens Police Academy that uses research to bring together youth and police. So please visit us at www.tapsacademy.org. Give us a call, 832-525-1560, 832-525-1560.
Well, fabulous, Doctor. I really want to thank you for being an ally between the youth and the police, as you're serving an important demographic in our society today. I want to thank you for the good work that you do to inspire our next generation to really maximize the fullest heights of their potential. And I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me this morning. It's most appreciated.
Thank you so very much, Kevin. Have a great day. Have a great holiday. Bye-bye.